thank the honourable member for Stirling for calling this debate and on his first speech in this chamber. I also would like to thank him for reminding us that this is the 20th anniversary of the historic referendum on devolution, which I think was generally accepted at the time as the settled will of the Scottish people to establish a parliament in Edinburgh, but clearly not in agreement with the honourable gentleman. And it reminds us in that respect that the Scottish Parliament was, at the end of the day, founded in the face of Tory intransigence, and it must never be forgotten. But I'm rather heartened that he has changed his view since, perhaps demonstrating the evidence and credibility of the Parliament and its 2 decades of operation has shown the light to the honourable gentleman. But I fear perhaps we may be doomed to disappointment, because it's clear that there is continued intractability of the opposition from the Tory benches about how we progress the constitutional future of the United Kingdom in a sustainable way. I was listening to multiple speakers on this side of the chamber referring to the need to move power closer to the people. Yet I think back to the abolition of Strathclyde Regional Council because it dared to hold a referendum on the maintenance of a public sector water supply company, for example. How does that square with their position? Also, I've asked them multiple questions, including the attempts at the Prime Minister on 2 occasions, about the need to establish a constitutional convention to deal fundamentally with the distribution of power and governance across the United Kingdom in the wake of Brexit, and I've had a totally unsatisfactory response on both those occasions. It's clear that when it comes to actually defending the integrity of this country, the United Kingdom, the Tory party is utterly inept and totally incapable of dealing with it. That is unacceptable. And it's become increasingly clear to me that the only presence in this House that will fight for the sustainable future and a future built on solidarity with the United Kingdom is the Labour Party. I recall John Smith's comments when he said there was 2 forces sawing away at the legs that support the Union. One, obviously, the Scottish National Party, whose primary mission is, of course, to destroy the United Kingdom, but also the stupid Conservative Party, who always continue to fall behind the curve when it fails to rise to the occasion to really deliver deep and meaningful fundamental reforms to the constitution of this country. It is unacceptable, and it must be called out in this chamber today. I have to say that even when he lauds the 2016 Act, which enhanced the powers of the Scottish Parliament, he fails to mention that all the welfare powers that were devolved were at the behest of my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South, who posed over 120 amendments to that bill, including all the welfare powers. So to suggest that this was all at the initiative of the Conservative Party is absolutely bogus and unacceptable. You did deliver it in the face of intransigence. You knew it because you failed to rise to the occasion on that occasion, sir. And I also looked at the comments by the honourable member for Angus on NHS cuts. No proposals to use the powers of the Scottish Parliament to actually meaningfully deal with that. They talk about NHS cuts. How do you propose? I've heard repeated claims that you have no interest in using the powers of the Scottish Parliament to meaningfully deal with that. My honourable friend, the member for East Lothian, said that 19% of Scots feel that the Scottish Parliament hasn't risen to that occasion. In fact, they wish to abolish it. I would say that we have to raise our game. We have to look at what we can do to build devolution and build the devolution settlement in a credible way. I believe that we need to utilise the powers of the Scottish Parliament now available to maximise the benefit for the Scottish people. No, I don't have time, sir, sorry. I would say that when we look at the opportunity in the Scottish Parliament, why is it that the SNP have ignored the will of the Scottish Parliament 5 times since 2016 on key issues pertaining to things like the public sector pay cap and raising tax in Scotland to deliver a progressive outcome? The honourable member for Glasgow South West, for example, talked about workers' rights, but I would say, why is it that only the Labour Party has consistently voted to lift the public sector pay cap in both these houses, which is quite clearly the case, and yet have only responded in the Scottish Parliament as a result of Labour pressure? I think that's quite clear, given the record of the SNP in both these houses. I think it's quite... The record reflects that, I'm afraid. I've seen the only real practical and progressive measure for tax reform in the Scottish Parliament coming at the behest of the Labour Party. I have to say, we've seen proposals for progressive taxation, potentially raising up to £600 million extra a year in Scotland. That will deliver real meaningful reform because it will end austerity in Scotland. We will also add £5 a week more to child benefit, which will raise 30,000 children a year out of poverty. That is the opportunity in front of us today.